So I recently salvaged a very large oak log, and it was easier to break it down into some oak cants and bring it back to the sawmill. So I used my Granberg chainsaw mills to do that, and I had the opportunity to use my new edger mill. And in this video, I'm going to show you how I put it together, give you a few tips and tricks, and at the end, tell you why you should have one of these Granberg mills in your mill collection. Anyways, it comes pretty much pre-assembled, which is nice. So it's very easy to put together. Probably the hardest thing, I don't even want to say the hardest thing, the thing that you need to pay the most attention to is the rails. Of course, I'm going to read the instructions. We all read the instructions on how things go together, but it does help. You just kind of look at it, get a good idea what's going on, and let's get to work. Here it is. This is the most important part of doing that, is laying out your guide board. This happens to be a big glue lamb. I've used one of these before. They say use a 2x6, and at times I think a 2x6 isn't heavy enough, and it can warp and twist on you. A micro lamb, glue lamb doesn't necessarily do that, and if you leave it outside then it will, but this is bigger than you need. This is one I had on hand, so I used it. Ideally, I would use probably an 1.5 by 6 or maybe 1.5 by 8 glue lamb. And what you're doing is that aluminum track that I'm starting to screw down, that aluminum track is the guide that sawmill or the edger mill rides on. So it's important that that is straight. It's important that all of those go together in a nice straight fashion. So what I ended up doing is using an aluminum straight edge, a couple Irwin clamps, and clamped it down so I could put 2 sections together at a time and make sure they slide down that aluminum reel and just kind of keep that process going. And you don't have to pre-drill. The screws that they provide are kind of, I'm not going to say self-tapping, but they will screw in, and they're, I always love doing the pilot hole, so pilot hole I did. All right, assembling the mill itself, it's not really assembling. You have to do a couple of things. You loosen up the 2 bolts, and then you do have to, where the handle is, you take that one out, slide the handle in. This is a pretty easy process. This is why we're not going in depth how to get your edger mill going. It's pretty obvious. All right, once you've got that set up, though, you set it on to your guide board. This is why you want a nice, clean, solid, straight guide board. You push it down because that inside, where I'm starting to tighten, that inside is actually, that rides along the board, and that's what keeps it level and perpendicular to your cutting surface. And then there's that V track, and the V, you can just see how that slides in there nice and easy. Next thing is there is a little plastic shield that you put together. And I think when I was putting it on, I was thinking that was going to be for sawdust, and it has nothing to do with sawdust, because you do get covered in sawdust when you're using an edging mill. This, I believe, if somebody from the Granberg world is out there, go ahead and chime in. But I think that's to give your hand some protection, so in case the hand slips off that handle, do that. I left that in there. I thought about taking that out, but the reality is, in this world, you always have those little, damn it. Anyways, we got the tip in there nice. That is a super bar by Canon. I really like their bars, quite nice. Anyways, that little plastic thing, I think, is there to keep your hands from sliding and flying into the chain itself. And so that makes sense. So take the 2 seconds and put that bad boy on to keep your hands. There, you can see how hand in there. If you'll notice one thing, I did my spike, my log dog things in there. I haven't removed them. I cut them off. I cut the spike off, and I left a little distance. When I put this on my 60-inch mill, that's the perfect height, a perfect distance, so I used that, and actually worked out as the perfect pivot distance for setting up this mill. Anyways, thanks so much for stopping in and checking out. I've been Glenn here at the workshop at the Gardens, and I got 2 good videos about using this thing, harvesting those logs. I'll put links somewhere. You should add one of these to your mill collection. It's very useful. It's not very expensive, and it goes on and off with very easy. So add one of these to your collections and check out those 2 videos about milling these logs. Cheers.